If you stacked every sold copy of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it would reach over 757 miles high. That's about 550 miles higher than the International Space Station. The air's so thin, molecules almost never run into each other, flying solo until they fall back to Earth or get lost in space for eternity. Perfect time for a good book, no? There's a reason over 40 million copies have been sold since it launched in 1989. It's good, really good. It's wisdom timeless, grounded, and, effective. Today's guest on the DesuckifyWork podcast, Kory Kogon, is here to share why that wisdom is more relevant than ever. Kory is a best-selling author and VP of Content Development at the Franklin Covey Institute. We talked about how their entire ecosystem of courses, content, and technology has been transformed to meet the needs of the world we live in today and will tomorrow. These habits can help our dopamine-addled minds navigate the uncertainty of AI, the complexities of modern leadership, and the peculiarities of the people we live and work with every day. Habit 1, be proactive. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Habit 3, put first things first. Habit 4, think win-win. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Habit 6, synergize. And habit 7, sharpen the saw. Here's me being proactive. If you like this episode, please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, or consider naming your firstborn DesuckifyWork. Good news, our name is totally gender neutral. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Kory. Okay, Kory Kogon, welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Thanks for having me, TJ. This is really exciting. Love to desuckify things.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, I'm excited to have you on the show because you work with an organization that kind of literally wrote the book on sort of personal development and really sort of started what has now become a much more common thing in the world. But I think when The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was originally written, it was a little bit of a newer thing. It's also one of the first books of that kind I read. My dad recommended it to me as he was starting his executive coach, and I sort of semi-reluctantly read it because I was young and dumb and didn't think, my dad's pushing this on me. But I'm glad I did because it's one of those books that sticks with you. And I'm excited to hear, how you guys are continuing to bring that to life. So with that, I'll give you just a chance to kind of go a little deeper in terms of, what you're doing, how you work with the organization and how your sort of experience of work shows up currently.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I'll try not to take the whole day to give my background here, but I serve as the Vice President of Content Development for Franklin Covey, and I've been for a number of years. I've been with them for quite a while. I'm considered one of the thought leaders, subject matter experts, and authors on a number of bodies of work around productivity and leadership. And was, honored to be able to work on, with the team on the 7 Habits and its update, because it was written, about 40 years ago. You might tell from my accent, born and raised in New York. I live in Arizona. I don't have a PhD. I don't have a master's degree. I grew up on the streets of New York and
Nice.
into business really quick. And as I like to say, learned on the streets of New York. And my mother wanted it that way. She wanted us to really get, real life. And just as I was going through my career, one of the companies I was lucky enough to work with, my previous company, Alpha Graphics, we were a Franklin Covey company, and I was the EVP of worldwide operations, worked my way up, to that. And so we were a Franklin Covey company, and so we were a 7 Habits company, and we sort of, built our culture and actually revolutionized the franchise industry based on our win-win agreements with franchisees.
Oh, nice.
And then coincidentally, after that, started to work for Franklin Covey a number of years ago now. And again, I think the main thing to mercifully end my bio with you, is bringing those street smarts and business acumen from
Hmm.
working in organizations to Franklin Covey to blend with this kind of work around the Seven Habits and some of the other work to make it
Hmm.
very real world and very applicable to people and what they're going through and organizations, what they're going through. So it's not
Hmm.
high-minded, it's really application based and people
Yeah,
can really do something with it. But it's a great body of work that really did change the world when Stephen first came out with it. So
it
that's a little
really,
bit about me.
it really did. And I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, so
Ah,
not quite the same streets, but certainly the New York vibe. I grew up in the suburbs of New York, so I spent a lot of time there, and I did live in New York for and work in New York for many years. I am actually in Arizona as well now. Um, yeah, so I appreciate that blend of kind of like street smarts and book smarts, if you want to put it down that simply,
yeah.
because I think that's ultimately what people are looking for is like we appreciate when people do the hard work of researching and testing and learning and all that stuff. But now, like, how can I touch it? How can I hold it? How can I walk with it? That's not always easy, like simply by reading a book. I think the beauty of that book in its original form even is that it was pretty accessible. But I think what you guys are doing now is finding more and more ways to make it accessible, not just for folks, like me who maybe read it years ago, but for younger generations who are sort of getting exposed to this work for the first time and now have 8 billion things competing for their time and attention. Um, I mean, I'm curious how how is this work resonating with people? And maybe I'll start with just sort of younger people who are maybe getting exposed to it the first time.
It's a great question, and one of the key things about the Seven Habits and what you were alluding to too, because a lot of people might be listening, thinking, "He taught, TJ's right. My grandparents read this book, and
Hmm.
I like really,
Yeah.
and we've spent millions, not only the book, but we've spent millions in updating our workshops that go with it, as well. Here was the main thing. Stephen's genius was in making the Seven Habits accessible through
Hmm.
what we call the maturity continuum. That was it, because Stephen was the first one to say there's nothing new in the Seven Habits.
Yeah.
It's really how it was packaged that made it digestible for
Hmm.
people. The other thing that's really key is that it was based and is based on timeless principles.
Hmm.
So, these are natural laws, things that don't change. And so, what we do constantly, and what the book, when you read the book, because they're timeless, natural laws, you can't change them,
Hmm.
they always apply to contemporary situations. So
Yeah.
whether it's going through the pandemic or going through an election or whatever it might, it doesn't matter what it is. And it certainly
Yeah.
doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, but everybody's going through some kind of trauma
Hmm.
there, or change in their life.
Yeah.
And like you said, people are overwhelmed in their time and they sort of need to get a hold of themselves, right? And sort of show up, just sort of ready to face the world. And then the second part is, and now, okay, if I'm ready to face the world, how do I engage with others to get a better result? So, young people, particularly based on how we're developing our courses in a very contemporary way,
Hmm.
are finding the Seven Habits very digestible. And honestly, it's been amazing. Week in, week out, 2 to 3 thousand books in the US sold. Week
Wow.
in, week out. The only time that changes is Christmas, around the holidays, where
Yeah.
people at the end of the year are like, oh, what can I do to reset for the new year? So I guess that's the data point that I'll give you, where
Hmm.
because of its timelessness,
Yeah.
it's been, particularly things are, a little crazy now. People are looking for how do I get my arms around what's happening? How do I calm myself down? And really think about being really effective through anything that's thrown my way.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's a breadth of perspective there that's really interesting, right? Because there is a lot of personal development. We talk about it as it relates to how we show up at work, and we'll get into some of that. But the reality of life is that whether we're talking about work or not, we're experiencing the fullness of life. And so we want to show up for all of it in a way that really works for us. And that maybe brings me to the next question, because it feels like the title of the work is very precise, highly effective people. What what does that mean? Is it's certainly coming from the world of the Franklin Covey Institute. When you think about somebody becoming highly effective, what does it look like to be highly effective?
We define effectiveness as the results you really want to get
Mm,
and being able to get those kinds of results consistently over time. And
mm,
again, there'll be ups and downs, but it's who do I want to be? How do I up my game in a variety of areas? And then what's my system in place to be able to be effective over time? The other
mm-hmm,
thing, and I'll make this a little more real,
mm-hmm,
is how am I effective in my day to day to show up to myself and others as responsible.
mm,
So I feel, what they say, character is who you are when nobody's looking. It's sort of the
yeah,
same thing here. Like, do I feel like I'm responsible? I'm taking ownership of my life and I'm making things happen. But
mm-hmm,
also, are others, whether it's my family or my friends or my community or at work, are others seeing me as like, hey, that TJ, he really makes things happen.
mm-hmm,
He's
yeah,
got his act together. He doesn't let
yeah,
things phase him. He knows how to deal with problems, etc. Um, and then being really socially aware of other people and being able to engage with them where people feel like, boy, and TJ really cares about what I have to say. Whether he agrees with me or not doesn't matter. Cares
mm-hmm,
about what I have to say, shows empathy.
yeah,
And boy, we do some really good work together. Well, we have a really great relationship. That's
mm,
effectiveness.
yeah, yeah. It's so interesting. Like, um, very foundational, right? Just like I like that phrase. Like, do I have my act together? Like, am I responsible? Am I somebody that people can kind of count on to deliver what we say?
Exactly. And
Right?
and particularly when there's so much turbulence going on. Are
Yeah.
we somebody that we're seen as a complainer, we're victimizing, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart, but because it's
Hmm.
like, ugh, don't talk to TJ because he's gonna complain.
Yeah.
Or is it, hey, you know what? TJ's somebody that will, if you talk to him, will help figure out how to move through A, B, or C. So it's
Mm.
really, and I'll just say, and I'm sure you'll get to this, it ain't easy. This is not kumbaya. This is
Yeah.
this takes I like to say this takes mental muscle to do
Yeah.
this well.
I think that's the beauty of it, right? Because I think in the world of self-help, self-development, et cetera, um, there is it's not all of it, but there's a subset that can sort of feel like, it's the hack, it's the shortcut, it's the whatever. And I think there's almost something, I don't want to say charming is the word that comes to my mind, but it's like seven habits, really? Seven? Because everything is three this, like, and this is like it's a little nod to coming from a slightly different time where it's like, our attention spans could handle seven habits and now everybody's trying to go for three. But I think your point is like it, doing the work is worth it. And so if you're looking for shortcuts, you might get that little jolt of like, oh, something happened. But true lasting work that then you carry with you and you can be that person at age 25, 35, all the way is going to take a little more than some little life hack. And so maybe this is a great opportunity to start to go through and either introduce for those who haven't read or aren't familiar, or reintroduce for those who maybe have read, which is probably a lot of folks. What are those seven habits?
So I just a comment. You might have to ask me that again, but just a
Yeah,
comment
no worries.
on what you said. I am, I've been facilitating and keynoting for a long time. I'm also
Yeah.
very aware of how humans digest information. So
Hmm.
you are right. And honestly, I'm looking up at my book on the 7 habits. Don't tell anybody. I haven't gotten the whole book, all at one. And
Yeah.
I've taught this thousands of times
Hmm.
and all of that. And I'll refer to the book. Read 7 Habits for Happy Kids. Read 7 Habits for Teens. It's
Hmm.
it's a simpler, I'm not saying it's complicated, but it's a simpler
Right.
version. The
Sure.
other thing is take one at a time. Don't
Hmm.
feel like, and in order. But if
Yeah.
I like to say, if people, this will segue to your question, which I do remember,
Hmm.
um, start with, if you just get habit one um, down pat, that to me is life changing.
Yeah.
And habit one is be proactive. It's the habit
Mm.
um, of choice, and it's really all about self-awareness. And I cannot tell you how important this is that people stop sort of, not that we do it intentionally at all, walking through life. Because a lot of times, somebody could be victimized. It's like, oh, go, don't talk to me. She's all, Mary's not a bad person. It might be her circumstances, the way she was raised,
Hmm.
etc. But when people get self-aware, and this is emotional intelligence, like
Hmm.
they can step back from the assumptions that they make.
Yeah.
And we do this, it's like, oh, I think, TJ's going to yell at me when we get on the call. And it's like, oh my gosh, I was so worried about nothing, right? But
Right.
we make these assumptions. And if we can get self-aware and step back and get very conscious of how are we behaving and how am I with our partner or our
Hmm.
spouse or our work, it doesn't matter because
Yeah.
we blurt things out of our mouth.
Hmm.
And then we get in trouble for it,
Sure.
particularly at home. I can
Yeah.
relate to, I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And Stephen said in habit one, there's a space between stimulus and response where you can
Mm.
really just count to 10, step back and rethink, wait a minute, before I hit that send button, can I step back and think about a different response that I want to get? So that's
Mm.
the essence of habit one. And if you
Yeah.
do that really well, that's a win. And then
Yeah.
if you want, I can tell you the other six.
Yeah. I definitely want to get into those. There's a couple things there. One that you said, like before you hit send, and I thought of that both literally and metaphorically, right? Meaning literally, we all know we've done the thing. We fire off the response, like the email or the text, and it's like, oh shoot, like I'm stepping in it. And then there's just sort of in conversation, we hit send on our thoughts automatically, pretty much. And what you're suggesting is, and I think there's something delightful about like even imagining that there's a send button that we have to hit and just picturing that. And before we say the thing, yeah, take the breath, you know, like give yourself a second to think, observe your thoughts, and then own your thoughts. And I think that's what I hear in the other part of it, be proactive. It's like, um, that was your choice to make that response, that suggestion, that whatever, that reaction, right? Versus if you're not doing that, you're kind of allowing yourself to be caught up in autopilot, right?
Autopilot, and people know that. You just blurt out, stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
and I say it is so hard because, as you know, I'm known as a subject matter expert, thought leader. I like to say I'm a laboratory rat as a human being, as an executive leader, because honestly, and it could be at home with your spouse or partner, where
Mm-hmm.
you're in the thick of it and your
Yeah.
adrenaline level, and you want to say something, and it takes everything in your power to not, because you
Yeah.
know what the outcome is.
Yeah.
But boy, do I want to,
Uh-huh.
because I know the release it feels, and there are times where I'm like, I'm going to do this knowing I'm going to get in trouble just
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm going to feel, and it's terrible to do. And I know it's a damaging thing, but I
Yeah.
just want your audience to know this is not kumbaya. But boy,
Mm-hmm.
when you get it right and you
Yeah.
can hold back and just say, you know what, I need to go to sleep now when I wake, because you know, when you wake up in the morning, you'll feel
Yeah.
better.
Uh-huh.
It makes all the difference in the world. But it's, I say counting to 10 is
Mm.
count to 10, sleep on it, hit send in the morning,
Yeah.
do something, even though every fiber in your body wants to respond. Don't, and you'll be a better person for it.
It really is amazing. Because I am sort of metaphorically nodding my head to what you're saying, and I'm sure everybody listening has had those moments, whether at home, whether at work, um, both when we were able to restrain ourselves, but it's very easy for me to imagine times where it's like, I just said the damn thing, and why did I say the thing? Like you knew it as soon as you're you're like launching this sort of attack on the situation by saying it, and yet something inside of us has us wired to want to say it. And I love that there's again, like you say, it's not kumbaya, but it's habits and it's habit formation, and you build up that muscle so that, yeah, maybe I don't need to launch the grenade into this conversation. Maybe that's actually
No,
not going to benefit the conversation, the relationship, the outcomes, coming back to this idea of being
the
effective,
outcomes,
the
right? Like, what do
outcomes that I
you,
want.
I mean, because we also know what it feels like when somebody says, "Oh, hey, thanks for listening," or
Yeah.
"Hey, I really appreciated that you're like, oh my goodness, I got a different result." And that's part of Stephen's work too.
Yeah.
I won't confuse your audience with what he calls the see to get model. When you change how you think about things and you behave a little differently and you
Yeah.
start to get a different result, it sort of
Mm-hmm.
creates a flywheel of, oh my gosh, that worked. And it
Yeah.
makes it a little easier the next time you get into it and emotions are high, where
Mm-hmm.
you can count to 10 and feel a little better about, okay, wait, I'm going to not, even though I want to, I'm
Yeah.
not going to because I know I'm going to get a better response. It's
Yeah.
Pavlovian to some degree.
Yeah. Again, it's beautiful. It's sort of beautiful and simple, and can remind us we're not as fancy as we think we are. We are animals, and we are
Or
run by emotion, and but we do have the ability to interrupt those cycles and find a way to create new ones, and that's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
yeah, and Stephen actually calls them the four human. I won't go into it, but the four human gifts, sort of the
Yeah.
self-awareness, and doing what I just said, the four human gifts, because we are able to do that in a way
Yeah.
that other animals maybe can't.
Yeah. So what's number two? What's the second habit?
So number two is, and I'll just connect it back. If we get this idea of, you know what, I have choices. I can choose how I respond. Then, and I'm being proactive. Then I'm going to begin with the end in mind.
Hmm.
Every project, every meeting, and also where do I want to go? You
Yeah.
know, whether it's under the current circumstances or in my life. So very famous, people will recognize the Franklin Covey mission statement. So a
Hmm.
lot, what a lot of people will do will with some work around it, it's in the book, it's in the course, is I want to think about my career and my experiences and my relationships and all of that and think about, how do I want to be remembered a number of years from now?
Yeah.
What's the legacy I want to leave? So what's my true north? What's my end in mind? So that's sort of the big picture one. And then
Hmm.
I always say anything we do, we should have an end in mind, whether it's a
Yeah.
project or meeting or anything else. And so if I'm being proactive, then what am I being proactive about?
Hmm.
Instead of just being pulled by the crisis of the moment or whatever, let me get really clear about what I'm doing. And that's habit two, the habit of purpose.
It's really interesting because when you say it, begin with the end in mind, my first reaction is, well, of course we should do that. And then my second reaction is I almost never do that. Um, you just jump into the thing, and maybe at most, you talk about something as simple as a meeting. At most, I have this sort of vague, I hope it's a good meeting. I think that's we all kind of carry that. And oh, I don't know about this meeting. It's so and so is going to be there. Hope it goes well. But But I don't think that's what you're saying. That's not enough, right? Like, it's like, so what does that look like if I go into a meeting and I want it to be a good meeting? How do I need to define that end so that it actually influences the way I show up?
Well, I mean, that depends what you want to accomplish. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I just got back from our corporate offices. Somebody called a meeting on a project on,
Hmm.
one of our programs, and it's like, oh, yes, they want to have the kickoff meeting for blah.
Yeah.
Friday afternoon, my colleagues and I are like, of course, it was at the last, like, okay, you're coming with an agenda, right? And again, there wasn't even clarity on like who's got the agenda, but
Right.
because, and by the way, your audience will laugh at this when you ask the question, have you ever been to an unproductive meeting? So everybody's doing what you're doing, laughing because it's a
Yeah.
given. And
Hmm.
a lot of the times, the reason is it hasn't been clarified. What exactly are we doing there?
Yeah.
We together before the meeting said, well, first question, what do we, as a result of us spending 6 hours together and everybody flying in for this meeting,
Hmm.
what do we want to leave with? What's our
Yeah.
end in mind? And we're the Seven Habits people. We should know
Yeah.
this, right? What's our end in mind? And our end in mind was to leave with a certain set of criteria for our next project. So that's what we came up with.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we figured, or whatever. But we also, in an agenda, it was the very first part of the agenda
Mm.
before we got into, and it would inform. Although we sketched out other parts of the agenda, we
Yeah.
knew it was in pencil because we needed to hear what the other stakeholders in the room had to say. And that's
Mm.
exactly what happened yesterday. And we probably spent 20 minutes first on, and again, 20 minutes is a long time when you have a 5 hour meeting and people flying out again.
Yeah.
We spent 20 minutes patiently going through, okay, as a result of our time together, knowing what the topic was,
Hmm.
what exactly do we want to leave with? And
Yeah.
we went around the room, everybody, and it was that we want to be 95% clear on the prototype for this workshop around
Yeah.
whatever it, might be. We had our true north.
Hmm.
We spent, if we were tailing off during the day, we brought it back.
Yeah.
And we finished an hour early
Well.
because we were really clear on where we wanted to go.
Mm.
So you depends on if you're calling a meeting, what are you calling it for?
Hmm.
And I'll also tell you, in a lot of teams and organizations, and again, I do a lot of speaking on productivity, let
Yeah.
alone the seven habits. I have worked with organizations at the C level where we have gone through exercises where we have one company in particular that everybody would know. It's been around for 100 years, but the CEO cut out 6 hours of meetings per week
Mm.
just by taking the time to stop and think about what are the ends in mind of those meetings? What are we even
Yeah.
holding them for?
Hmm.
Because a lot of them were just being held to be held because they have for the last 60 or 70 years.
Yeah.
So you need to decide. Kory Kogon can tell you, here's what an end should be.
Yeah.
But depending on what the meeting is there an end in mind that you want to accomplish? And if there isn't, give them the time back. They'll love you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's again so simple, but yet almost startling in the fact that, like, if I just imagine all the meetings I've been in, how many was there an active decision around what is the end that we're trying to achieve here? Probably 99% no. It doesn't mean all of those meetings were pointless. It just means we probably were already starting at a deficit because we didn't even know what we were trying to achieve. And then you get that kind of like we're just going in circles because everybody's effectively trying to find the reason for the meeting
Right.
through just trial and error, as opposed to like just taking a beat and going, yeah, what's the point of this? And if, like you said, not sure. Okay, maybe I don't need that meeting, or maybe it can be done through some other means, an email, whatever. And then I think about extrapolating that to as big as like your whole life. And again, like how many of us are really thinking what is the end that we're searching for, this legacy? And I think for many of us, and this was true for me, that showed up probably in my 40s, started to show up a little bit. But what I wonder, and maybe, and in some ways, I think that the current younger generation is sort of primed for this because I think they're already starting to think of this. But how do you help, 20 somethings or even younger, because you talked about teens or whatever, but start to envision life in that way, certainly in a way that I never did. I wasn't thinking that way. Like, how do you help 20 somethings see that they're building towards that legacy already?
So first of all, it's what you said before, and that's why, almost as popular as the Seven Habits for Happy Kids, Seven Habits for Teens.
Yeah.
It's also amazing. The Seven Habits, part of the Leader in Me program, is in 7 or 8 thousand schools around the world,
Wow.
building young leaders. And so they're learning these skills early on to really envision who they want to be as young adults, etc.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, I believe this is Kory Kogon's opinion, based on reading and stuff like that, but I'm not giving you empirical data around this.
Yeah.
I think the younger generations are organically doing a better job of envisioning
Mm-hmm.
where they want to go.
Yeah.
And us older generations, and again, I'm stereotyping and I'm being very general here, are pushing on that a little bit, maybe for
Yeah.
the wrong reasons, because
Mm.
because when they're set, it's like, oh, well, they want to be the CEO tomorrow.
Right.
Right. Or, my nieces, one left a job, they're in their 20s when, they left a job because, like Ann Corey, they're not developing me. They're not helping me.
Yeah.
And so I think they're organically, I want to be an executive. In some cases, I'm
Yeah.
going to come back to that.
Mm.
But I want to progress. I want to be at this point. I want to be making this much money. So I think there's more to that. And, this is who I want to be in my life. I want to be in the corporate world. I don't. So I think there's a little bit more of that
Yeah.
going on, than we think. And then
Mm-hmm.
just to finish the thought I started before, there's a lot, particularly in the Gen Z world, just with the turmoil as it's been since the pandemic,
Yeah.
with the corporate world kind of thing. A lot of people who are also making decisions to not go into leadership positions,
Yeah.
that their legacy is, I'm starting my own business. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to a vocational, I
Yeah.
want to do that, and that'll be my legacy for,
Mm-hmm.
and start a family and take vacation. So again, I think they might be doing a pretty good job.
I think they are, and I think yeah, to your point, like folks like us who are a bit older than that, like we might, in some ways, maybe be reacting because we didn't maybe show up that way, and we're kind of like, well, if I didn't get to show up that way, how come they do? And then the word that showed up for me as you were describing this is impact. I think they want to make an impact, right? So yeah, that may show up as like, I want to be the CEO by the time I'm 26, and that may not be realistic or not, but like, how do you help people make an impact? Because I think that's ultimately what we're missing out on. It's like if we expect people to just show up and do what feels like mindless work, and either we, if we're not able to either show them why that work is actually making an impact, or have a conversation with them and try to figure out how might you, as a 23-year-old person with certain skills, make a bigger impact towards what we're doing. I think we need to get better at that. Those of us who have the ability to have those conversations.
I'm doing a lot of work on that, right? Right as I put it down to prepare for our call.
Yeah.
A lot of work with this, that leaders need to understand that people that are coming into organizations, small, medium, or large,
Yeah.
they want to know what the purpose is.
Oh yeah.
Why? And listen, there's a lot of people that are doing work to just put food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a job is a job is a job. They will do a better job when you help them see how their work contributes to the
Yeah.
end in mind of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, they're demanding it more and more and more.
Yeah.
And I think it's a gift for those people that are working to just put food on the table to help them see some of this, to help them
Yeah.
feel better about what they're doing and realize, hey, you know what? There's more to this than me just, you know, feeding four mouths.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to work and I'm really making a difference too.
Yeah.
And it just changes the game, I think, for their psyche and for how they're going about it. And so
Yeah.
it's responsibility of leaders to help people find their ends in mind and
Yeah.
connect the dots around their
Yeah.
purpose.
I fully agree with that. And I am actually grateful that younger people are uh, shaking their fists at us older folks a little bit because it gives us a chance to step up and be better and help them connect those dots. All right, so we're proactive. We're beginning with the end in mind. What do we do next?
So if we're doing those two things and we're like, okay, I got it, I'm going to do this and this is where I'm going. You said this when we first opened. We are more overwhelmed than we ever have
Yeah.
been. People are
Mm.
crazed, they're burnt out, work is burning them out. I mean, there's a lot, a lot going
Yeah.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Habit three, first things first, the
Mm.
habit of focus. And in it, it's how in the world, what is it? How do I do it? How do I
Yeah.
get these important things done when I'm getting 77 emails from my boss and they're pulling me in a million ways? I don't even know if I have a job, all those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
so, first things first is really about learning to discern and everything that's coming in at you, getting very conscious. Again, it's this mental awareness of the things that are coming in and discerning what's most important, less important, not important, and not trying to answer every single email that comes in and doing all of that,
Yeah.
and just trying to identify what are the few most important things that I need to do in my most important roles
Mm.
at work, at home, and not forgetting that there's a lot of noise around that and a lot of things that we have to do that we don't want to do.
Yeah.
But how do I put focus on those few things that I want to do and have the right planning systems? We call it weekly, daily planning,
Okay.
where I'm not just having, a to-do list here and hoping I get it done, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a psychological thing to it before the week starts. On my calendar, let me get in those few things next week that I need to really get done
Yeah.
because it's amazing when you put things down in a calendar.
Mm-hmm.
um, the ability to accomplish them goes up by 200 to 300%.
Wow.
That's really amazing. So
Mm.
there's more to it, but first things first is really about the systems of planning, of discerning, and we don't have to go into it here, the time matrix, this combination of urgency and importance, and
Yeah.
things that I really, really are important, and those things that maybe I can eliminate that I'm doing. That's, I'm tripping myself up,
Yeah.
knowing that other people are going to try to take my time as well.
Mm. Yeah. This one really hits, right? Because there are so many things battling for our time and attention. It feels like at least habit two is at least part of the story here. Meaning, if I have a clear sense of the end that I'm trying to get to, whether it's life, a meeting, a project, a relationship, whatever, I can start to begin that discerning process. Are there is that the key, or is there more that needs to be done to really start to sift through that noise? Because it's coming at us just so fast.
These habits are really integrated like that. So you make a really good point. I always say when you excel or you at least get aware of, each of the habits, they build on each other.
Yeah.
I have had people uh, come up to me in sessions and stuff and say, I realize I'm just accommodating everybody. Somebody comes to me and
Yeah.
needs help, I help them. That's how I feel. I help them. And
Hmm.
they'll say to me, what I realize is I haven't put together sort of my map of what's really important to me.
Mm.
What's my contributions to
Yeah.
my family, to work, whatever, and just thought about it and got clear. So I've got sort of fake accomplishment going on by just
Mm. Yeah.
helping
Yeah.
everybody else. And so they're like, okay, now I have a roadmap. I have some idea about who I want to be, what I want to do, even day to day, what I need to accomplish. The
Yeah.
meetings we talked about too. And
Hmm.
that helps me start to say no to some of the things that,
Yeah.
I've just become the accommodator and the people pleaser. And I don't want people to go away saying Kory's from New York. She said, "Don't be a team player." You do, but I just want people to discern: is
Yeah.
this something that I should drop everything to help somebody with because they're new to the company,
Right.
or the same people coming to me over and over and over because I'm known as the accommodator? When
Hmm.
in fact, if I do have clarity around what's important, I can start to say no to some of those other things.
Yeah. And that's again not easy,
No,
but
not.
there's some really nice clean structure that you're starting to create there. And again, I think the ability to look at the end in mind, and then maybe in a company structure, the ability of leaders to help people connect the dots between the end in mind of the company versus the end in mind of you as an employee, and how you can help kind of serve towards that need, that you can then go, oh, okay, this is where, these are the ways I provide value here and I get energy and value. Now there's a filter I can run all of the noise through, and
Like,
kind of do that. And then if I have that added benefit of that first thing where I am proactively navigating my emotional state and regulation and all that stuff, I'm also not getting caught up in the waves of this thing
right.
comes in, right? The people pleasing can be in response to something that's going on for us emotionally, or somebody gets mad at us and we want to fix it. And it's like, da, 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 da. Like, so yeah, you can really start to see how things build, and to me it just feels like a little bit of a relief. I'm starting to, like, you can start to feel like, oh, okay, I can actually sort of own my life more than I ever thought I could. So
I
now
think
that
that
I've done,
TJ, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think
no,
in today's world, that is really important. And
yeah,
remember what I said about this being timeless. I can go back 10, 15 years, some other things going on in the United States and the world. And, administrations change, and
yeah,
just working with some federal governments at the time and things changing. And I remember this was really important for people to and again, going through the pandemic was the same thing, and
mm-hmm,
or all of these things where people are like, regardless of what's happening, this is a relief. I remember one it's giving me goose chills. One woman in particular, she's like, you really saved. It wasn't me, it was the work. You really saved my life on this because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I didn't know if I
mm-hmm,
had a job, whatever, but I own what I do with this,
yeah,
and it's going to be painful, income, all those things are there. This, again, I keep saying, not kumbaya. This is real
yeah,
life.
mm-hmm,
But the relief that some people feel by just, I can own this, I can think, step back, think about, okay, what's next? What could I do? We call it work in our circle of influence, not our circle of concern. There's some
mm,
things I can't do anything
yeah,
about, but there are things I can do. What are
mm-hmm,
those things? And then how do I
yeah,
plan to get them done? And it can be, particularly in times of change, a sense of relief for
oh yeah.
people.
Yeah, I mean, I can feel it physically as I think about it. And then, as you mentioned, that sort of distinction of circle of concern versus circle of influence, we live in a world where it can feel like everything is in our circle of concern because we are aware of everything. You know, there is 24/7 news and social media and so much stuff coming at us. And it's all like if you have a pulse and a little bit of human empathy, you're like, I care about all of it, right? At least to some degree. And okay, it's okay to want things to be better here and here and here and here and here, but getting really clear of like, where can I actually influence things, whether that's at work, whether that's with societal stuff, whether that's family stuff, whether that's anything. That's hard work, right? Because I think in some ways the modern sort of media cycle almost taunts and teases us into believing that we can control everything. And that's like the biggest lie in the world, right? It's like you can't. So like, where do you how do you start to discern that? How do you like, so that feels like a useful structure. What can I really influence? Is that built into some of the stuff you guys put out there in terms of the courses and all that stuff?
It's totally
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying it's a relief for some people. And the circle of influence, circle of concern shows up back in habit one to say, I'm being proactive. There's a space between stimulus and response. Let me pause and think about it. I'm all caught up in,
Yeah.
everything that's going on, the company's, cutting the budget and whatever. I'm all caught up in that energy and
Mm-hmm.
laying awake at night worrying about it, which by the way, I do. I have to
Yeah.
talk myself out of it, right? It's
Yeah.
like, wait, Kory, you're better than this. You can't do anything about that stuff. What can you
Yeah.
do? And it's honestly a lifesaver. And I have to be careful too, because I'll look back at myself and go, oh my God, you acted like such an idiot last week because you were
Mm.
all caught up in,
Yeah.
and you got to let go of that too. It's like, at
Yeah.
least I know how to fix it,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So just I just think it's more important than ever for people, to be able to do that to move forward.
Yeah. I think these skills are super important as well. And I, you know, got 3 out of the 7 being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and first things first. So then what do we do?
So that is, and Stephen called that the private victory.
Mm.
And he said, that you got to work on yourself. Nobody else can do that for you, so
Yeah.
that you feel more confident about your own life and where you're headed.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, you appear as responsible to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you appear, I think the other word is credible to others. They're going to listen to you, right? Because
Yeah.
they see you making things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now we are into the public victory. I'm prepared now to do be more effective with other human beings
Mm.
because they see me with some credibility.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now for me to continue that and not blow that, actually, I need to habit for think win-win.
Mm.
And it's the habit of abundance.
Okay.
I'll use a little bit more of it out there in the world today.
Yes, we could.
But it's very difficult because like you said, we're animals. Humans are about scarcity. Humans
Mm-hmm.
are about, we were in prehistoric times at the hearth and a saber-toothed tiger
Yeah.
came, and we would, and we would hoard things. We would hoard food because we had to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like wired into us. But think win-win is about social awareness.
Mm.
Instead of I need to win all the time, how do we make this a win for both of us?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the habit of abundance, that it's not just about me, but it's about both of us versus I'm going to win, you're going to lose, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to lose. There's people out there, I'm going to lose, you're going to win. I'll
Yeah.
I'll concede all the time.
Yeah.
Um, or I'm just in it for winning.
Mm-hmm.
The ideal state, the most, I'm not going to call it ideal. I'm going to, because ideal means theoretical.
Yeah.
The most effective place
Yeah.
is to go for win-win,
Mm-hmm.
meaning I will have courage for myself. I'm going to stand up for myself, and I have consideration for how you're thinking about something. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really attitudinal where I'm really seeing the other human being, and I'm always thinking, let's go for win-win.
Yeah.
And again, you have to be very self-aware and socially aware around that. And I'll just give you an example of if people are struggling with this,
Yeah.
how human this is. How many times, I mean, we all do it. It's so human. You say to me, "Oh, Kory, exciting news. I just got promoted. I just got that." And I go, "Oh, TJ, how wonderful. I'm so happy for you." And what's going on inside? I'm like, "What the heck? Why did he get that? Why did I get right?" And
Yeah.
that scarcity
Yep.
versus, and again, we're going to do it. But when we realize, you know what, when we behave the right way, there could be enough, there's going to be enough for everybody. Another
Yeah.
example of how we're wired, toilet paper during the pandemic. What did
Yeah.
we all, right? I mean, we just ran, why? It's
Yeah.
because we're wired to hoard. So this idea of how do we overcome space between stimulus and response. Oh, TJ, I am really happy for you. And I
Hmm.
might go to my boss and say, I'm really happy for TJ. What is it that I need? Being proactive.
Yeah.
What steps can I take in my circle of influence to
Mm.
say, I'm so glad for him. What do I need to do
Yeah.
to be promoted in the near future kind of thing?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
in any situation, you want to attempt to go for win-win, and it's an
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah. And it's again, it's not easy because it is so hardwired into us to be in that scarcity mindset, right? And the thing that helps me a little bit is to realize the way we got out of those caves is by becoming more of a win-win species, by learning how to cooperate with each other and forming social networks and learning that as individual humans, we can't stand up to the saber-toothed tiger and we can't do this. And there are other species out there that can dominate us. And we found a way to thrive by working together. But I imagine from all the way back into that cave till now, there was some part in the back of every person's brain going like, I don't want to collaborate and coordinate and do all that stuff. I just want to go out there and do my thing. And so that being proactive, that emotional regulation, that taking the beat to like know that that's always going to be there. That a little bit of reaction, like, I don't like this.
Well, and two things. In prehistoric times, I'll give you another example.
Mm-hmm.
They knew inherently to go slay the mammoth
Right.
for food,
Mm-hmm.
that they had to work as a team.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was so they knew this collaboration. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing that I'll say, and it's not in the Seven Habits, but it's some of the work that I do, and Stephen was not a neuroscientist, he was just ahead of his time,
Yeah.
is the neurological need for social bonds,
Yeah.
for healthy social bonds. Is a whole, it's a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
podcast, but
Yeah.
there's a whole science. Some of my favorite, neuroscientists do this level of work on social connection. And when you don't have a good relationship, the your brain goes to the same place as physical pain.
Yeah.
Just
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't want to put your audience to sleep, but it is really interesting
It
that
is
the more
interesting.
you think about win-win, there's a whole neurological effect to that creates a flywheel of better relationships when you are more consistent in thinking win-win, and it's not always going to get there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you kind of mentioned like I feel like we need more of this, and I think as we've gone now through the first four habits, it's in some ways it reminds me of kind of the hierarchy of needs and like that whole thing.
Exactly.
It's like, and when individually or collectively we suffer some kind of trauma, COVID, social unrest, whatever it is, we sort of pull back and we almost are at the beginning again, and we have to kind of relearn. And what it feels like right now is we're a little stuck, sort of just as humanity goes, to be like you don't have to look that far back to when we were kind of swimming in the win-win river
Right.
a little more.
Right.
But man, it does not feel like that's even visible to us right now. It's just like we're barely even sure what the end in mind is, or really understanding how to regulate our emotions. And so, what I'm hopeful for, and this is the optimist in me, is that we can start to move through some of this, and hopefully by just continuing to remind people that there is a way to move through this by being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and really getting some shared truth around what is the end in mind that we want. And then, okay, now how do we take our first steps through that? Then the win-win starts to show up again as like, oh, okay, we've kind of collectively gotten our blank together, and now we can think win-win. Okay, so what comes next now? If we can get to that space, either individually or collectively, what's the fifth one that opens up?
One is seek first to understand, then to be understood. So if we, and you're leading, you were there, if we're willing to think win-win, then I am willing to put hold on to your hat. I'm willing to put myself in the other person's shoes. I don't know if you want me mentioning other book. I can give attribution.
Sure.
I read a
Whatever
book.
you want to do.
It's Charles Duhigg, Super Communicators. Get him on your show. It's a fabulous book, and again, a lot of the neuroscience in this. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes, no matter what your opinion is, no matter what your point of view is. And Stephen, I'm talking about the 7 habits. Stephen did all kinds of work, obviously all kinds of work around this. And really it's the habit of empathy.
Yeah.
How do you really set we call it autobiographical listening, your point of view? Because you're like, I mean, your mind just goes, and we're built like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, stop it, set that aside for a moment. We use the example, a mother who wants a child to take piano lessons and the kid doesn't want to play. And the mother's like, yeah, but when I was a child and I couldn't, and you should. And it's not the child's has no say in it. The mother but when she gave the child a chance, when she held that back and said, tell me about what's going on with the piano lessons, and she created a safe environment for the child to say, I don't like my teacher, she makes me nervous, and they were together able to fix. They came to a win-win. They're able to fix it. And so empathic listening, autobiographical listening from our point of view versus empathic listening, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, keeping your mouth closed, even though you're churning inside with your own point of view, and saying, do you want to tell me more about that? And just reaffirming, boy, it sounds like you're really upset about, what's going on. And when you acknowledge somebody else's feelings about their point of view, about what they're thinking, it encourages them. They're like, yeah, no, I really am upset. And they start talking more about it and they get more out of it. And you create a dialogue and you hold back your opinion. And the way because I'm ready to fix, I'm an ops executive. I want to fix everything.
Yeah.
And I'm probably worse at home. This is home. My window is the world. I'm probably worse at home. I tend to finish sentences, and I keep working on it. But the more you keep your mouth closed and just really make sure you understand them. And like I was saying, create this dialogue. And when it's like what I was starting to say, what I will do to hold myself back is I'll say, TJ, is there anything you want to add to what you just said? And it's amazing because you'll see the other person they'll look down inside of them, like inside. No, I think that's all. They'll go, yeah, and whatever. And they're not done. And then when they're done, it's like, okay, do you want advice? Do you want me to, whatever? Because how many of us have been in this situation where somebody, particularly at home, is saying to us, oh, this happened. And we're like, oh, well, you should do this and this. And they're like, I just need you to listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of thing. I mentioned Charles Duhigg's work besides Stephen because as Super Communicators, he did some empirical work with graduate students on taking, and I'm just going to be candid here, folks from opposite political parties.
Oh, okay.
And did some experiments with them and put them in the room and really they worked on just getting people to listen to each other. And
Mm.
the results were amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, really amazing. So, and again,
That's
I'm just
beautiful.
using that as an example. It could be any situation,
Yeah.
but it can be done
Well, yeah, and I think that's a very relevant example because we live in that world where that polarization is very real, and
on
then
both sides.
oh
On
yeah,
both sides.
on both sides, and then you can naturally extrapolate that to the sort of political realities that show up like at work and the factions that show up at work,
Right.
and it's like I'm
Right.
on this team and they're on that team and they don't want us to succeed and blah 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 blah, and it's like to simply even just by trying to understand, I feel like you're already ahead of the game, right? Like it's almost like your synapses reconnect in different ways just by saying, "Let me try to understand." And then if you can actually get to a place where I think I do at least understand more, um, then like all those assumptions start to wash away, and now you can have conversation that is not going to be territorial, which is like so much, particularly at work. And I guess this does happen at home too, but at work, it's like, this is my thing and this is their thing. And I really want us to succeed, and they don't really want us to succeed. They just want to, we tend to believe that everyone else just wants their thing and we want what's good for everybody. Um, and so I can imagine this process of just simply, you know, pausing again, using step one a little bit, and
Good.
then that idea of empathic listening, like that really jarred me because it's like, it's not natural for most of us. That's not where we start. So to
No.
be like, oh, listen to understand, like, huh, that's new. Let me see what that's all about. But you can feel a different, at least as I do, try to do it, I imagine it. I feel a very different presence than when I'm listening or trying to be understood and force my perspective into it. So, are there any techniques or tools that do that, or is it simply the basics of taking a breath and rethinking how we show up?
Um, First of all, I'm going to jump to habit seven, sharpen
Okay.
the saw. I'm going to
Yeah.
skip six for a moment because
Yeah.
seven is one of the answers. I
Okay.
keep saying it's very hard. We say it's difficult. And I said mental gymnastics. Stephen made the point, sharpen the saw, habit
Mm,
seven. If you are not taking care of yourself,
mm,
and it's the body, mind, heart, and spirit. If
yeah.
you are not taking care of yourself, for me, if I don't drink enough water, or like I have a whole, desk full of food and water over here, and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, I'm getting on this podcast, and my 40-ounce, water thing is empty, and I'm like,
Ah.
oh, but if you are not, you know what it feels like 4 o'clock in the afternoon when
Mm-hmm.
you've not eaten, not,
Yeah.
and whether it's at work or home, you will automatically like, ugh, this is when I make mistakes,
Yep.
or I can't have this conversation with my
Mm-hmm.
family now because I don't have any reserves left.
Yeah.
You have to be, it's like running a marathon. You have
Mm-hmm.
got to take care of yourself. You've got to be healthy. Your
Mm-hmm.
brain takes so much of your energy
Yeah.
that you have got to keep, you need it needs glucose, it needs nutrients, it needs
Mm-hmm.
water, it needs all those things for you to be able to pull, a lot of
Mm.
this off. And I'll tell you, sometimes, I mean, and if you think again, whatever the situation, first of all, some of you listeners are saying, well, TJ just said at work, but I'm thinking about this at home because we
Yeah.
hear this a lot. I'm not a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
but the idea of empathic listening,
Mm-hmm.
when, the arguments happen, everybody has their point of view,
Yep.
and I'm going to get my point across, whether you like it or not, has been the
Mm-hmm.
downfall of many a marriage.
Yeah.
And again, my whole being wants to tell you
Mm-hmm.
what to do.
Yeah.
And if you can just hold back, you'll find yourself sleeping on the couch less.
I can believe that, and I definitely like went there a little bit as well, like thinking about conversations with my wife um and how, in that situation, and I suppose this shows up at work if you're with people long enough, you're not only showing up with this desire to be right and to kind of make sure they get your point of view and they understand that either you have a fix or a better way of doing things, but it's like it's so layered because you've had that conversation 1,000 times, and so it's almost like you feel like you don't have control. Like it's like, oh, here I am, like I've literally caught myself. I'm like, oh, I'm playing this scene again. Like it's
Right.
like it feels like I'm playing a scene as opposed to actually being a human being, because it's like,
Right.
oh, here now it's my turn to say you don't know that because this, right? And I think that that obviously shows up in relationships. I think it can show up at work because you get to know somebody enough, and it's like, yeah, you keep bumping up against that person, that department, that boss, that whatever. Um, and yeah, just to simply take care of yourself so that you have that little reserve of energy available to you to take the breath, let things sit for a second. What would it look like if I listened to understand what this person is saying as opposed to judge them or prove that I have the answer or I'm right? Um, Again, I don't know that I would get it perfect, but like, again, just doing that is an amazing shift. And I don't know what it is about our wiring that makes it us so blind to taking care of ourselves. Like, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, why do we believe that we can just like make it work and not have to eat better, drink the water, go for the walk, do the thing?
I think, I don't know. I think I don't have the answers. I think some of the
Yeah,
neuroscientists can, but particularly with A types, I mean, we're just driven. We're in our
yeah,
prefrontal cortex. We always want to accomplish things. We want to keep going.
hmm,
Um, and I think that we have a false sense sometimes of what accomplishment looks like.
mm,
So it's like we always feel like we need to get things done and keep
yeah,
going and, all of that when accomplishment is also, I mean, accomplishment is also stopping, taking breaks and,
yeah,
and all of that. And it's a big question I ask people. And when we're talking about sort of that filter you were talking about, the best use of time. And there's a category we call quadrant four, the quadrant of waste.
yeah,
And I'll say to people, "Well, how many of you like a little quadrant four?" And everybody will raise their hand.
yeah,
And I'll say, "Well, what do you like about it?" Because it's the quadrant of waste. And they'll
mm,
say, "Well, I need to take a break." And I'll say, "And well, okay, why do you need to take a break?"
hmm,
Well, because, I need to give my brain a rest. I need to relax.
yeah,
And I'll say, "Well, is that important to you?" Well, yeah. And I'm like, "So what's the moral of the story?" It's not a waste because I'll say,
right,
"Is television," or because they're like, "Oh, I watch television, that's a waste," or "I
hmm,
have a drink, that's whatever it might be."
yeah,
I'm like, no, if you love going on Instagram, that's
right,
not at boy or girl.
right,
That's like, that's useful for you to take a break and rest your
hmm,
brain. It's when you put it too much, when it becomes an addiction,
yeah,
that it becomes a problem and the return on investment of your time, attention, and energy
yeah,
somewhere else. So,
mm,
that's no magic bullets, but we're just sort of wired to keep going. I think the older generations were socialized to it.
yeah,
The
hmm,
younger generations are much better
yeah,
now at nope, taking vacation time, enjoying life, and so I
mm,
think a lot of it is socialization
yeah,
based on either how we were raised or what history has shown us and stuff like that. That's
yeah.
Kory Kogon's non-empirical
No,
experience.
it rings true. And I think um, it kind of takes me back to the sort of, again, that beginning with the end in mind. If I, if I think about what I ultimately want and what I need to get what I want, I may realize that some amount of quote unquote waste time is actually not waste time. And then I can be more purposeful with accounting for that. And then I can also recognize when I either don't get enough or when I have kind of spilled over. And yeah, I've spent 3 hours doom scrolling, and I don't know where the time went. It's because maybe I'm not protecting my time as much as I need to.
And you burned.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love watching television. And honestly, we love watching some shows that are just
right.
I can
Mindless.
name. I love watching Below Deck.
Yeah.
So people are like, oh, Kory, you're a thought leader. You're really Below Deck? And I'm like, Below Deck.
It's fun, right?
It's fun to watch. If I watched it all day and didn't get my work done then that's a problem. But boy, an hour or two of that, very relaxing.
I don't watch that one, but I have my versions of that. And
I'm sure.
I think that's like giving ourselves permission for that. Like, it's kind of like if I'm thoughtful about why I do that. Like, I do that because it's a full release for me. I am outside of reality for 2 hours. Great. Because then I know that I can jump back into reality.
You're recharged.
And
right.
I'm recharged and I feel good and all that stuff. And maybe I've had some laughs, and laughter is its own medicine. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, sharpen that saw, take care of ourselves. What was step 6?
Okay. Think win-win. We have the attitude of abundance.
Yeah.
Begin with the end in mind. We're listening with empathy. And so when you have those two working together, it sort of creates the skill of synergy. I'm willing to put myself in your shoes. Win-win. So now I am open to your point of view and others' points of view in order to collaborate on stuff and put all of our ideas on the table together to come up with what we call might be a third alternative. It's not just, I mean, even this meeting yesterday, I have, you can tell I'm pretty direct and outspoken. Yeah. I have my point of view on how I think things should go, and other people have their point of view. And I've had to learn this over the years. Be open-minded, listen to everybody without jumping, because you'd be amazed. And that's what happened yesterday. When you put everything out there, and it's like, wow, boy, when you look at everybody's ideas, we came up with something that was sort of it wasn't a compromise.
Right.
Which, by the way, in today's world, I have made clear with my colleagues and even in the rebuilding of the 7 Habits course that in some cases, just compromising would be a fairly decent thing. But Stephen was about compromise isn't good enough. You can do better. You can synergize. Where it's not just compromise, a little bit of a little of this. Yeah. It's let's get all of ideas out on the table. And out of that, this third alternative, something that neither one of us thought about or this group thought about, will arise out of it. And it's really the highest form of collaboration. It's really, and it's very doable. There's companies out there. IDEO comes to mind as a company that's been around for a long time, that this is how they do their work. So it's not a theoretical thing, but if you're open to other people's point of view, and if you value differences, and again, lots of conversation about that in today's world, differences could be my style. I'm a very fast thinker. Somebody else is a slow. Doesn't mean they're bad. I just process quickly. Somebody else doesn't. Somebody is risk adverse. Somebody is risk forward. I happen to be an introvert. Others are extroverts. That's when we say value differences. It doesn't have to have this whole big meeting. It's just that we're different. We have different things and different strengths that we put on the table and use to its best use to come up with something different. Yeah. It's interesting. As you said all of that, my brain went back to my career, which was in advertising before I started working as an executive coach. And one of the things we were often afraid of is you present 3 ideas to a client and they go, well, I love idea 1, but I'm really interested in idea 3. Can we put them together somehow? And the first reaction is, you're going to create some Frankenstein mess, right? And what if we are allow ourselves to
to try to really understand what they're saying there, is underneath that might be, well, there's an insight here that's interesting. But there's something in the tone here or the whatever that I like as well. And if you just sort of try to cram them together, you probably will end up with some Frankenstein mess. But if you allow yourself to think like you're talking about and synergize and actually realize that a new, better or stronger idea could emerge from that information, right? You've now provided me with new information. Okay, I thought this was it, but there's something here that's intriguing. Oh, I can see that. What shows up when I take those ingredients, not kind of the finished form, but just those ingredients, and now mix them together? Some new product, no idea shows up. And I think if we don't have kind of all these habits working for us, somewhere along the line, we're going to miss that. We're going to resist that. We're going to say, no, you're wrong. I'm right. You don't get it. I get it. Those kinds of things, where if you just flip it towards, what can I really understand what's going on here? Not just the words you said, but like the intent behind them. Then we can get to that place. So that really strikes a chord with me. And I imagine some folks listening who are from that world, but any world where you have to create things, I got to imagine it's a lot of work to create something, and it can feel really frustrating if you create something and it's not immediately like, I love it. And so if you don't have this mindset underneath it, that new information is simply new information and a chance to then create something even better, then you get stuck. So I really appreciate that thing. And now it's like you can really start to see how all 7 of these habits come together. One question I want to ask before we start wrapping up is, we've talked a little bit about the craziness of today and technology and all this, and AI is this big piece, right? It's like, it's everywhere. How can the 7 habits help us play in this sort of new world where AI is now a big piece of the equation?
So we need another podcast for that too. There's a lot of answers to that. First of all, there's still people that are really afraid of AI.
Yeah.
So again, when you think of being proactive, it's like, all right, just count to 10. Don't be, it's here, right? Yeah. So how do I just calm myself down and think about, I can't avoid it. So what's in my circle of influence? What can I do? My engine mind. I'm gonna open up ChatGPT. I'm gonna learn a little. I'm gonna take a little course. I mean, that's what I had to do. I'm gonna take a little course. I'll learn a little bit, more about it, etc. So that's one piece. The second piece, I hope there's 3. The second piece is when you think about first things first in particular. So all the things we have to do and are overwhelmed. Particularly, and I'll speak particularly to leaders about this, which will link to the last one. The amount of things that particularly generative AI can do to take on some of the tasks and help with planning and be an assistant. And it's not rocket science. It's very accessible for anybody, almost too accessible, because a lot of people are using AI outside of the company, whatever, and companies' security and privacy. So I'm caveating, check with your company and all of that. But it is amazing how AI in some cases can take the burden off this overwhelm.
Yeah.
And I say that about leaders in particular because it brings me to the next point, is that because those practitioners that know AI very well today, they are begging for the human skills that are required to make AI hum. Because AI does not operate, AI does not operate, hey, write me an email, You can't just take that email and send it out.
Yep.
even the art and science of prompts, which I'm
Yeah.
learning more about every day, right? Do we
Mm-hmm.
have the right prompts to get the information? And then once we get the information, it's a start, but you need humans
Yeah.
to work on it. You need collaboration skills
Mm.
for even getting the language models together. And then, so all of the AI practitioners are begging for the human skills, the emotional intelligence skills for themselves and for their leaders.
Yeah.
Two, that their leaders are leading with integrity, that they're setting vision, going back to and outcomes, and that
Mm-hmm.
they have these interpersonal skills to be able to help the AI practitioners do their work because they know
Yeah.
better than anybody that they can't. So
Yeah.
the fourth thing on leaders, a lot of leaders, there's still not, this uh, viral, emotionally intelligent leader out there that knows that it's a combination of caring for your people to really expect a lot in
Mm-hmm.
results. And because of AI, I'll go back to what I said before, a lot of their tasks can be taken over by AI so
Yeah.
that leaders have the opportunity to spend time on skills like the 7 habits to
Mm-hmm.
become more effective in leading other humans and
Mm-hmm.
keeping their best talent.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot to be said about the world of AI and human capability
Yeah.
in this merging here, and where in the 7 habits AI in particular can play a role in taking on some of the burdens, some of the tasks, and time management, etc.
Yeah. And as you said that the win-win thing kind of showed up to me, meaning there's an opportunity to move from what I think a number of us are in, which is sort of a scarcity mindset around AI is taking over, it's taking jobs, it's whatever, as opposed to what can humans plus AI create that benefits all of us and creates more. And this gets even to the synergy. How can we create new and better things, better solutions? How can we actually solve problems that we didn't think we could solve before, but now maybe we can because we don't have to spend as much time maybe doing some of the rote stuff. And now that opens up opportunities for the human mind to be embracing our creativity more and our ingenuity more and our resourcefulness more so that, and again, the 7 habits kind of feed into all of that so that we can show up and go, yeah, what else can we do? Right now, it's like, how can we do what we do faster, better, blah, 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 cheaper? Fine, but that feels like step point five of the bigger
Right.
project, which is like, now that we did that, how can we thrive as humanity? And that's going to take, I think, embracing what the 7 habits are putting out there.
Right. And a lot of people, I get it, are like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
AI is taking my job.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, and I don't have the research in front of me, is that it's actually going to create more
Yeah.
human jobs over the next decade or whatever. And what you just described was somebody moving out of their circle of concern and into their circle of influence. It's like, oh my
Mm.
God, AI. Well, wait a minute. How can
Yeah.
I embrace it? What can I do? How do I,
Mm-hmm.
and because if in a company, if somebody is seen as, oh, you're going to replace me, and so I'm just barely showing up for work, you're going to
Yeah.
lose your job. And
Yep.
then you're going to say, see, AI replaced me, when in fact
Yeah.
it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You are the one who behaved yourself out of a job.
Mm. I like that phrase. Behaved yourself out of a job. Let's try to avoid that. Um, well, a couple of other questions before we go. One is I've asked you a number of questions. I'm curious if you have something that we can put out there to the audience, sort of related to all of these topics that we've touched on.
Well, I think to the audience, I always like to say that those people that are reacting to this, like, oh my gosh, I'm such a victim, or I
Mm-hmm.
never listen, or whatever. The question I would ask is, what are you doing really well at,
Yeah.
of this? Because, everybody is we're good at still good
Yeah.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the question to the audience is, and I guess it's sort of both a lesson and a question, is of all these things we've talked about, what are you really good at that you could be a coach to help somebody else to pay it
Mm,
forward?
mm.
That's the question I would ask your audience.
I love that question. It's a really wonderful perspective shift, especially if you're kind of caught up in a victim mentality, which we all get at some point in time. It's a nice reminder too that we do things well, even when we're feeling afraid, scared, anxious of all the change around us. It's like, oh yeah, I am really good at, helping to bring people together to solve problems or whatever the thing is. So yeah, I love that. Um, the world of work has been going through a lot. You've got these 7 habits that you work with. You've got your own perspectives on top of it. If you could sort of wave a magic wand and desuckify work out there, what does that world look like to you?
I think the most important thing with desuckifying work is that there was more being done in organizations that is more outcome based than activity based.
Mm,
And there are some leaders and organizations that do that really well. But
yeah.
to me, working for an organization that creates, here's where we want to go, here in your role, together we've decided this is what you need to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And the leaders sort of, to some degree, get out of the way
Yeah.
so people can think. We're knowledge workers. We're paid to think, innovate, create, and execute.
Mm-hmm.
That people can get the work done without feeling that they need to, and this is, again, I would have said this last year, that they don't feel like their activity is being managed,
Mm-hmm.
but they're being led to the outcomes that they've been asked to do.
Mm,
And they're using their potential and their talent with the help of the leader as a coach
yeah.
to do it well.
Yeah.
That's, that might sound a little idealistic, but I know organizations that do that,
Yeah.
really well. And I'm also trying to cut across all the discussions of remote, hybrid,
Yeah.
in office. There's room for all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's reasons for all of that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of organizations know that. But whatever the circumstance, in office, I agree. When you're in office, you get to collaborate better. I mean, that's why we went to our offices yesterday. When you're in a room, that kind of thing. But I'm trying to cut across that to say, as a culture, when work is more outcome based with good coaching and feedback systems in place,
Mm-hmm.
then who wants to leave? Who wants to leave
Yeah.
that? Because I'll tell you, when people feel like work sucks, that's when they'll leave you to go someplace else for more money.
Yeah.
Because it becomes work that sucks becomes transactional.
Yep.
I'm leaving for more money. But when you desuckify it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure there's a million different answers you get from different folks, then boy, even if somebody says, hey, we're going to increase your pay by 25%, it's like, let me just think about that, because do I want to leave this amazing place,
Yeah. Yeah.
just for money?
Yeah. No, I think that's really true. It's rung true for me over the years. I've even, taken pay cuts at times to move into places where I could see more of that opportunity, where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're going to give me a chance to influence the outcomes that you've actually outlined for me, which is already a big step just by letting me know what those outcomes are, right? Because you can walk into some places and it's so activity based that whatever those outcomes are that the organization might be chasing, they're buried under so many layers of things we just have to do to justify our existence, as opposed
Right.
to like, oh, I have to do things, but now I know when I do that thing, it's helping that thing. And that even comes back to the whole idea of purpose and all that stuff. Like, oh, I'm actually having that impact that I've been craving. So yeah, no, I mean, that sounds pretty desuckified to me, if you ask me. And I agree. I don't think it's sort of just wishful thinking, because like you said, there are people doing it. It's not that we ever do any of this perfectly, but if we sort of start with that end in mind, to kind of go back to that habit, then we're already so much better off than if we just start by saying, hey, we do all this stuff. I want to join us? No, I don't know. Yeah. So that's a wonderful thought. And I think we can start to wrap up on that. The only other question I'll put to you is, how can people connect with you, find you, learn more about all the beautiful work that you're doing?
Thank you for asking. And so I'll talk about 7 habits. First, Franklin Covey, you can just go to the website, www.franklincovey.com. Like I said, we just recently we invested millions into updating the workshop that is 100 million people have gone through over the last 40 years. And so you can go there if you just want the book, Amazon, any of the bestsellers for that. As far as anybody can connect with me on LinkedIn is the easiest way to do that. Happy to connect or chat with anybody. So thank you for asking.
Awesome. Well, Kory, this was a delightful conversation. I feel sort of re-energized about all the possibility that the 7 habits can create, not just for myself, but sort of out in the world. And I love that you guys are just continuing to invite people into your world in new and different ways, so that we can do more stuff that matters and actually have an impact.
And feel better about ourselves too.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people need that too.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, TJ. It's really a pleasure having this conversation. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kory. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Kory for bringing fresh insights on a longtime favorite to the show. You can follow Kory on LinkedIn and check out the Franklin Covey Institute at franklincovey.com. Be sure to check out Kory's book, The 5 Choices, The Path to Extraordinary Productivity, as well. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to dive deep into some of your own challenges at work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session where we can explore new desuckified possibilities for your future. Bye, everyone.